The very powerful and the very stupid have one thing in common. They don't alter the views to fit the facts, they alter the facts to fit their views, which can be very uncomfortable if you happen to be one of the facts that needs altering. I'm Eddie Webb.
And I'm Chris Spivey.
And today we are going to alter our facts as we wrap up this run of classic Doctor Who here on Genreless.
Dad joked me.
So over the weeks, Chris has taken great delight to talk about the facial expressions I give during our video call when we record this. And I just want it documented on record that Chris was so angry at that pun, he fell out of frame.
True. I would like to point out to all our listeners that for a wrap-up episode that usually has no notes, Eddie has 8 pages of notes about Doctor Who that he wants to go into.
That's completely not true. I don't need notes. It's all in my head.
I didn't say they were filled with real notes. They're imaginary notes. They're like 8 blank pages of
Oh, God, there's way more than 8 pages of that then.
So it's taken a long time to get here. I told Eddie last week off recording that I've loved Doctor Who, and I like that we took a break in there. I think we should have taken one more break. Because for me, the end of it, I was excited to do it, but it took a while to get there. I think we had hit one regeneration almost too many.
I mean, maybe. I know for me, at least, I do feel like this... So I feel like this length was kind of on par, even though not as long, but was on par with the intent of our superhero run. And this was much less of a push to the finish for me. I think having the breaks in the middle certainly definitely helped. But the last few episodes, frankly, were a new thing for us. Let's talk about a whole bunch of stuff without digging deeply into them. Let's talk about audio dramas. Let's talk about fan productions. It was more historical and alternative media than we've ever done. So it felt a bit weird. I agree. But honestly, the only part that was really a struggle, it wasn't even that much of a struggle, really, was the Silver Turk. And that was just because it was one of those things where, like sometimes with this podcast is I enjoy it, but analyzing it mildly ruins my enjoyment of it. There are times where it's like, I enjoyed this. I cannot explain why. And as we continue to explain it, I am rapidly coming out of reasons to why I enjoyed this. But at least in the case of Silver Turk, it's like, really coming down to, what is Paul McGann? I like Paul McGann. That's honestly good enough for me.
So I guess I should rephrase that. I enjoyed it, but I felt like it wasn't not repetitive, but it was getting to the point that as a long-term fan of Doctor Who, I talk about Doctor Who a lot. I talk about it on the podcast. I talk about it off the podcast. I think about Doctor Who. Sometimes I dream about Doctor Who. Which regeneration? You'd have to come into my dreams to find out, and it's a scary place. But
it's Dave Tennant.
Oh, I like Tennant a lot. I even now have my choice of which Tennant.
I know,
10,
right?
14, the variant of 10.
Time Lord Victorious.
Tennant. Yep. Surprising no one, it's going to be the Time Lord Victorious. I like the dark, angry Doctor.
Have you read the novels? Actually, they're actually reasonably good.
I have not. Now I have to put that on my to-do list. Too many things to do. Eddie, I can't be like a full-time parent, work a full-time job, be a part-time podcaster, part-time game designer, play video games, try to go out to find things to eat and drink, and then read all the books I want to read too. Something's got to go.
I know, right? So this is going to be nothing to do with Doctor Who, but I have found a new, and by new I mean a very old, life hack. It's new to me. That's helped me with my reading list. And this is innovative and shocking and stunning, and no one's ever tried this before, and I'm surprised no one has tried it at all, which is, if I'm not enjoying the book I'm reading, I just let it go. And as someone who is obsessed with finishing books, that took me a really hard time to wrap my head around. But now I feel so free. Like I could just not, as people in the Discord might know, it's like I was reading a Sherlock Holmes series. I liked it. And then I didn't like it. And I was like, you know what? I'm just done with this. I'm going to move on to something else. And it was great. I didn't feel like, but there's still two more books. I should finish those. No, I just let it go.
I now wonder if that's the book series that Seth Sarkowski has started reading that he's enjoying, because it's Sherlock versus the Mythos.
There's honestly so many of those. You can't throw a rock and not hit at least one or two of them. But if it's a series, it probably is that one, because I think it's the only one that's actually had more than just a short story's worth of information.
I have a similar model with my TV watching. I get, well, actually, that's a good question. How many chapters do you give said book before you throw it away?
Well, since I read digitally most of the time, my usual metric is about 10% of the book. Right? It's like I figure 10% of the book, and if it's a physical book, like 2 or 3 chapters, depending how long chapters are, right? Like obviously, if I tried that for the Discworld book, that's just pointless because there are no chapters in it. So it's like, where's the chapter break? Oh, already done.
If you tried it with the old Dan Brown books, I think that'd be about 8 pages.
Well, I mean, to be fair, that's about right. That's about as long as I stand at Dan Brown. But I mean, like, you know, I think about it as like similar with television, like more and more, like it's like I have found that A, I can stop watching TV if I'm not enjoying it, but also B, there are times where it's like, I think I will enjoy this. I'm not enjoying it now, so I'm putting it on pause and come back to it when I think I will enjoy it better. And that has actually worked out for me extremely well. There's been a couple shows I've rewatched recently that I hated when I first watched, and now I'm like, okay, I don't love it, but I'm enjoying it better this time around.
So for me, I've got the 3-episode model for a TV show.
Mm-hmm.
Equivalently, I'll watch the first 3 episodes and kind of get a good opinion of it. Because I
Mm-hmm.
stand by the concept that a pilot, no one knows what they're doing. They're
Right,
like,
I
got
agree.
an idea, they're throwing it up, and if they get lucky, it sparks and it hits.
Mm-hmm.
Second episode is in adjusting from whatever the pilot was to what you think that you want. So that's usually kind of messy, might be better. By the third episode, you've figured out what you want, or else you figured out enough to know that I don't want what you're trying to do.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and actually, to bring us back around to the reason we're here today,
Just to
I
talk.
kind so I've been actually kind of sort of watching classic Doctor Who off and on from the beginning since we started doing this because I have it all on BBC iPlayer, so why the hell not? And what ends up actually happening is I know most of the stuff so well that I just kind of have it as background noise most of the time.
Mm-hmm.
And then occasionally I'll look up and go, oh, wait, I actually don't know this part, rewind it, watch a part, move on. But I'm still deep in Hartnell. And like, really, if it was any other show, I probably would have given up by now. I mean, I watch a fair amount of old television. I'm used to a certain amount of pacing issues. But, when you watch 5 episodes of them where the entire premise is they're small and they're dying from insect repellent, it's like I don't know what I'm watching anymore. You think I'm joking, but that was an actual fucking show.
Oh, God. Hartnell era.
But so, since we did this, I think it might be good value to kind of do a one thing to talk about maybe is go through each of the incarnations and kind of do a now that we've done the whole run, what we think of them now, pros and cons, and maybe if people want to check this incarnation out, what's a good starting point for them. So
Sounds
let's
like
start with
a workable plan. Since you're trying to bring structure to our very unstructured normal wrap-up episodes.
I have 12 pages of notes in my head. But anyway, so William Hartnell, who
No,
officially,
we have to
canonically, is
start.
no longer the first Doctor.
Thank you. I was about to make that joke.
I didn't
We
say the
have to
first Doctor.
start with
William Hartnell.
we have to start with the earlier incarnations of the Doctor. So that would definitely be Ruth, right?
Right. No, that's why I was very clear on what I said because I was anticipating this amount of bullshittery from you.
From the limited information that we've seen about Ruth, the I don't even like using the name they gave the character.
I've actually never seen on Timeless Child, so
They call her the fugitive doctor.
okay.
So
I
you'd be
still
shocked to know that I don't like the fact that really for your first black doctor, sans Lenny Henry, is that you call that character the fugitive doctor.
right, right. Is that a the show called her that, or the fans called her that?
I can't remember now. That's all sort of
Okay.
intermingled in my brain at this point.
Well, quick digression, but this is something that I find fascinating. It's definitely happened in Doctor Who, and I'm also simultaneously going through some Transformer stuff, and it's happened to Transformers 2. But actually, Star Trek, on a lot of long-running franchises, what tends to happen is that something is not said on screen. Fans need to talk about it, so they have to come up with the terminology to discuss it. And over time, that terminology becomes canonized, if you will, inside the television show. And so for early stuff, it's not a huge deal. It's okay, this thing you're seeing on screen is now retroactively called this. Sure, whatever. But as you move forward, the cycle between fan terminology and official terminology gets faster and faster and faster.
Mm-hmm.
So sometimes I wonder, it's like if the fans glom onto an unfortunate phrase, and if the people running the show aren't thinking about the ramifications of an unfortunate phrase, if it kind of just slides into it because it's what the fans expect to be called, it's like you don't have to use what they say. You can make completely new words. That's something we as language using creatures can do.
Based on the storyline they have involving the character, I think the show used it first and the fans picked it up. But that's
Okay,
a 70-30 assertion on my part.
sure. Okay,
From what we saw, I think Joe Martin would have made a great doctor if given a real proper run of series to do it and not a stunt that it was.
sure. So of course, naturally, she's going to have at least 3 series of Big Finish audios.
Hopefully, if not more.
I'm not joking. They've been announced. The only reason why they haven't come out is because apparently there's some production issues because they started recording right around COVID.
Mm.
But yeah, they've been announced. They're recorded. They're apparently going to start coming out. So yeah, no, I'm not. Yes, it was also a joke because that's what Big Finish does, but it actually is a real thing that's happening.
Cool. So that's really all we can say because you haven't watched it, and I don't want to give anything else away from the little bit that she gets. And before
I'm
then, we
actually,
get part. Sorry, go ahead.
I'll say this is actually one of the few things I'm mad at Shudi's Run of the Doctor for already is because it's very clear that Shudi's interpretation is going to continue to play with that stuff. It's like fuck, I have to go watch this because now it's real. It's happening. It's like all right, to understand the character of a Doctor I love, I have to go back and watch a story that I've heard nothing good about.
Yeah. Then, before we can even still move to Hartnell again, we have to talk about all the regenerations of the Doctor from the brain of Morbius, because all of those happened before we saw them on screen.
You joke, and yet I have read 3 anthologies that actually do write stories about those 3 things, those
Yeah.
8 incarnations.
So, now having made that joke, the real question becomes, do you want to go into the TV show proper when we're talking about these doctors, or do you want to go into the Big Finish and we talk about like the Unbound Doctor? If
We
we're
did
going to
wait.
do Doctor, we can get into the weeds of nerdiness here that only you and
Right,
I will go back and forth.
we can.
And you will win because you know more Big Finish than I do at this point.
I would enjoy that conversation, but I think to make sure our fans don't go bonkers, we should probably stick to the actual television show that we discussed on this podcast.
All right. We talked about Big Finish on this podcast too, but I will
We did,
acquiesce.
but we did not talk about things like the surprisingly good run of alternate Third Doctor Dave Warner sets.
Mm-hmm. David Warner. Amazing.
Taken from us too soon, and by too soon I mean he was very old, but still.
Yeah. Even his stint on a little bit on Babylon 5 when he popped up.
Yeah, I was surprised when I just got to that scene. I was like, what, that David Warner? Holy crap.
So, irrelevant tangent that's not at all pertinent to this, but saying David Warner sparked something else in my brain that made me think about this. I want to cover the Secret Adventures of Jules Verne during one of our runs.
I've never seen that. I didn't even know it existed.
Without It's a sci-fi show from, I want to say, the 90s or 2000s. It only had like 13 episodes. I remember liking it. I'm not going to say it was good. I'm just going to say I remember liking it and leave it at that. We'll come back to it in the future.
There was a weird 90s era thing of historical shows that are secretly science fiction shows.
And that it was
Because there was Briscoe County Jr., there's that one. There was, I think it was called Voyager or something about a guy with a compass.
Voyager, just because he had a kid sidekick
Right,
and they
and
would
that was the one
travel
with John
through
Delancey
time.
in it, right?
No. That had some. Oh, I forgot his name. He wasn't a super famous actor, and I think he died in a motorcycle accident too soon
Okay,
too.
and then John Delancey was in another one that was also like that, a historical one that had
Legends,
secret
I think, is that
legends.
one,
That was it.
because that's
Yes,
the one that had MacGyver in it.
right, because he was a pulp writer who had to pretend to be his own character in his pulp. Yes,
Yeah.
okay, yeah. There's a whole weird genre of '90s, and I mean, technically speaking, if you move outside the sci-fi thing, there's also the Sharp series with Sean Bean, where he doesn't actually die in any of them, surprisingly.
All right. Sorry. As I said, I'm a little out of my Doctor Who mind frame right now, and so it struck something else in me that I want to do for future season.
Fair enough.
Anyway, back to this Hartnell.
Yes. So William Hartnell, first Doctor.
No.
God damn it, Chris. What?
William Hartnell is an earlier incarnation of the Doctor. We have no idea now who the first Doctor was.
The first televised Doctor.
I'll let it go.
The the incarnation of the Doctor portrayed by William Hartnell, as we're discussing right now.
Love it.
We should give them all new sobriquets now. So he's the cranky Doctor.
Oh, I like that. Crotchety Doctor, actually.
Crotchety Doctor.
I like
right.
that. By the way, if you're curious, this is actually how writing works. You'll come up with something, you'll write it, and then you'll consider it's like, I don't like that, strike out. You can go through, and your editor will read it, and your editor go, really, is that the best word choice? Come on.
Right. I thought you were gonna go with the you write something down, you cross it out, repeat it ad infinitum until you run out, your deadline hits.
And then you just submit it and hope for the best.
Right, basically. Secrets of writing.
That is what our podcast has now become, just us complaining about the process. Genreless, two game designers bitching.
Right. Yeah, because we need reason.
The Hartnell era is still one that I rarely ever come back to because of the time frame it was made in, the insensitivity of the subject matter, which goes back to the time. Also, the plotting is really bad. And as someone else that watches a lot of old movies and TV, it's bad even from that standard.
Right. I have a weird fondness for it. Most of it being just because it's Doctor Who, and therefore I have a fondness for it because it's Doctor Who, and I recognize that. But the rest of it is entirely because of things that have nothing to do with William Hartnell. Like, I genuinely like the first TARDIS team. You know, I think that Ian and Barbara are fantastic companions, and because the show didn't quite know what it was, they had a little more fluidity and impact on the story that other companions would lose for a long time. And so I'm in this weird case of, like, when I do occasionally watch that era of television, I find that I'm watching it in spite of the Doctor rather than because of the Doctor.
Is that because the Doctor is almost a villain in that first era?
Yeah, but I mean, that's interesting because it's almost like a parallel version of what could have been, right? Like, I mean, there's no way the show would last this long if it kept that momentum, but it's something we generally haven't seen from the Doctor, and we probably won't ever see again. Again, Time Lord Victorious being an exception.
But it's even then different because the Time Lord Victorious would be an anti-hero. This Doctor
Right,
straight up
yeah,
is a villain that's going to
right,
stone
right,
someone to death.
right. Time Lord
And
Victorious is someone Doctor who thinks he's doing the right thing and makes some bad decisions, whereas this is just Doctor who's willing to smash someone's head in with a rock.
knows it's not the best decision.
Right.
Which then goes back, I think I made the joke earlier, though, that it also parallels some of Dr. Smith from Lost in Space.
Yeah, it's true.
but then Dr. Smith becomes infinitely more comical, like almost immediately.
Right, and those are the two paths, right? Is like you either become comic relief or you become leading man. And for the longevity of the show, they made the right choice. But for William Hartnell, they made the wrong choice because William Hartnell is not a leading man, and that's where a lot of the rest of the show kind of falls apart. Like, and also, again, like he had some really good bands. I mean, I'm actually now at the point where I'm watching Vicky and Steven, and again, they're a really good TARDIS team. And so I'm watching the one with the monk, meddling monk,
Mm.
and watching Stephen and Vicky deal with this time traveling monk who's trying to screw over this British battle is fun. And then the doctor shows up and starts explaining the plot to him. It's like, I don't care. Get back to Stephen and Vicky.
Well, I think the more we're talking about it, it makes me think it's more the era of television that it was made, where it was less focused on the alien, or I don't now I don't think it was alien then, but less focused on the traveler, more focused on the humans themselves and their ingenuity.
Right, right.
And television, I think, at that time was doing more of that sort of vibe.
And I feel vindicated in this our collective viewpoint because of, and I hate myself that I'm going to defend these movies, but I'm going to defend the Doctor Who movies that came out in the 60s. Because the way the Doctor is portrayed in those, first of all, it's just completely incompatible with the television show in any way, shape, or form. But the way he's written is a different, like I said, the other parallel paths are Doctor's comic relief, and that's actually what happens here. He's still kind of the leading man, but he's also a lot more comedic and gives the relatively sizable cast around him more room to do stuff because he's this dottery old man that happens to occasionally get the right information occasionally. And so it's this weird kind of alternative way that Doctor Who could have evolved. So like there are moments when Hartnell recognizes, oh, I could be funny, where he genuinely sparkles, but it's so rare. And frankly, a lot of the television being at the time was like, yeah, we just need to fill 30 minutes in a time slot. So some of the episodes, there are entire episodes where it feels like you cut the entire episode out and nothing really happens. So it's just a very different era of television with a show that was that fulfilled one need, rapidly became a very different show, and it doesn't really settle in until far too late into Hartnell's tenure. And by that time, it's pretty clear he's not the person that can carry the show forward.
Well, that and by that point in time, his health and everything else had caught up with him, also, though, and it was a lot of different factors. And but also we have to think about it is that they were recording live, which for me is still a
Yeah,
phenomenal thing. We're
yeah,
recording this live right now, like it's a real play in the theater. You can't fuck up. Go
yeah. Right, right.
constantly. That's enormous.
Yeah, and that's I think it's the thing is like it's 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 in a way going through classic Doctor Who has been kind of a look at how television evolved in the 20th century. Because by the time we get to the Eighth Doctor, television's made in a way it's pretty similar to where it's made now. There's been some pretty huge jumps in the past 10 years, but it has kind of settled into a form for a good long time. So yeah, I mean, we're moving from how does television work? Let's basically just film stage plays, and then let's do something slightly more ambitious with Doctor Who beyond filming stage plays. And we can't quite pull that off, but we do, and a lot of the actors and the production team are just trying their damnedest, and that shows, and that love is really on screen. But again, they don't really. Television has changed subtly by the time we get to Troughton, and Troughton's run to move into that one, I feel benefits greatly from that change.
Well, the Hartnell era also had something I don't think any of the other shows have gotten. They had multiple chances from how few television shows there were. How they, based on the initial pilot where the Doctor was too scary,
Hmm.
to them re-airing it like a week later after as it aired, against part of the impact of JFK's assassination definitely impacted their viewing figures. It
Hmm.
kept getting chances to find its footing, which if that had happened at a later point in time for I think any other Doctor, it would not have occurred. it would
Right,
just been in the rubbish bin.
right. And as we talked about, and I'm sure we'll kind of cover again real quick, but like certainly by the time Doctor was genuinely in danger because of the quality of its show, it was too much of an institution to easily get rid of. So I respect it for being the beginning. I respect how the groundwork they lay down. I'm still to this day shocked at how much of the Doctor Who formula is present and correct. As much as we talk about how it's finding its feet, um, so much of it is pretty much the shows we're watching today and a lot of levels. So I respect that and I appreciate that and I have a fondness for that. But in terms of television I want to sit down and watch and enjoy myself with, very little of it is in my mind.
And before we move on from the Hartnell era, I want to take a moment to thank all the marginalized people that were essential to the
Yeah.
creation and the future of Doctor Who that were there from the start, who slowly get replaced and their
Hmm.
story kind of disappears, gets erased, how it always seems to happen when something starts becoming successful.
Yeah, I mean, it's been nice that in the past 10 or so years, those stories have been much more coming back to light. And those characters, people are getting those people are still alive are getting the recognition they deserve. But yeah, they're absolutely erased for easily 40 years.
So you were saying, what episode would you have chosen from the Hartnell for people to jump into Doctor Who if they want to start with these? I'm assuming it's going to be the one that has 7 episods. A
Well,
lot of
A,
it
that's
in
narrowed
tunnels.
down,
That's
but
in
B,
tunnels underground, trying to
I,
cross over a ravine.
I actually will say the Daleks. That said, it helps that there is a new colorized, edited version that takes out so much of the fluff. And frankly, unless you have watched them back to back, like I accidentally did, you don't even notice the seams. But I think that if you watch the edited version of the Daleks, you could see why people thought this show had a lot of potential. And the fact is that, again, as much as they were struggling to figure things out, the fact that you can watch the Daleks now and go, oh, that is absolutely a Doctor Who episode. I don't need to make a ton of mental adjustments to understand what's going on here. And that was episodes 5 through 8, 5 through what, 17? I forget how many there are now. It's so many millions. It's 25 zillion episodes. But from episode 5 on, it's Doctor Who. They pretty much found the scaffolding, the structure, the guts of the formula.
And if you're asking me what episode you should jump into if you want to start with the Hartnell era, I'm going to say none of them. Honestly, if you really want to
Certainly the
start with
best.
Doctor Who, you should not start with the Hartnell era. And if you're asking me for a good episode, I do not remember enough of them because I actively don't watch them, as there's the level of offensiveness that I feel for that era has soured me on it.
Sure, totally fair. Let's move on to Patrick Troughton, who portrays the second incarnation of Doctor Who on television. Do this every
We can
time
let the
now.
joke go. We can let
No,
the
no,
joke
no, no. It's happening every time now. Like I mentioned earlier, for me, the fact that editing is now a thing. That's the big lens shift here, right? Is that editing occurs, can happen, is massively beneficial. Combined with the fact that Patrick Troughton absolutely understands uh, what it takes to be a leading man, and also what a leading man means to an ensemble television show. So that he not only can have the show center on him charismatically, but also he can give room to his co-stars to make sure they have their own star turns, and that's just night and day compared to Hartnell. He understands what his role is in the show is, both as a leader and as a collaborator.
You covered a lot of what I was going to say, because that is one of the joys about Troughton, is that he is a great actor, but he also provides space for all the other actors around him to be able
Mm-hmm.
to do their own bit, and they elevate each other constantly. And he still has some of the moles from Hartnell where he's not really the lead of the show. It sort of transitions during his run. Because
Right.
part of the thing of having Jamie there, Jamie feels almost more like a lead, and then they become a duo.
True.
And that's why whenever you think of Troughton, you think of Jamie. Always. Like whenever anyone that's seen any of the Second Doctor, you go, "Where's Jamie?" every time you see Troughton, because that is how iconic those two are together. It's like when you think of the Seventh, you think of Seventh and Ace. They're
Yep.
together.
Right. Right. And I mean, honestly, that's another good point. Like Jamie, as much as Ian was kind of the first male companion, and really Jamie's the last noteworthy male companion for a good long run of the show. I also feel like
What?
Jamie, for a good long run of the show, he
All right,
what?
we're gonna have to then discuss what makes a companion compared to someone that is just a series regular.
Okay, well, where I was going before you
Okay,
so rudely cut me off
that's what I do.
was that I'm in a noteworthy male companion, right? Yes, I understand that Harry Sullivan exists. He's fulfilling a very different role in my arguments than Jamie is. And same with Turlo. Turlo's filling a very different role. Jamie is very much a classic companion in the terms of he's someone who's excited to be here, enjoys the experience of traveling with the Doctor, and also can stand up to the Doctor when he needs it and act as almost a peer or an equal at times. There have been very few male companions who have filled that role.
You made an assumption of where I was going to go. I was going to go with the Brigadier or Benton, who show up technically during the Second Doctor's run for the Brig. And
Uh,
do the Brig and the unit people technically count as companions? And if so, there would be male counterparts that are relatively strong during the Third Doctor's run with the unit crew.
all right, you know what? You've convinced me.
Hence, we've never discussed what a real companion
I'm
is
just gonna
versus the
throw that
series regular.
assertion out. I'm gonna reframe it uh, in the sense that the whole my assertion is taking too much to think, but you're right. That's a valid counterpoint. I did make an assumption. I apologize for that. So I will instead say I feel like what made what I liked about Ian and Barbara, what I liked about Vicky and Steven are there were supporting cast members. Let's stick with that terminology for right now. Who did some really cool stuff, but they were bouncing off of Hartnell. Hartnell was a counterpoint to them, and so the dynamic was, while not antagonistic, certainly they're doing one thing in the show, he's doing another thing in the show. Jamie, for me, was the first supporting cast character that elevated the Doctor as a character and carved out his own. Well, he didn't carve it out. He combination of him doing it and also Troutman giving him the space, but that provided a context that the companions are not just being dragged around by this weird alien guy, but rather that they can actively contribute to the joy of the travel and also can act as a foil, I think is the word I'm looking for, to the Doctor. And there have been several notable female supporting cast characters that have done that well. There are very few men in the show who have done that well. And Jamie probably stamped the mold on the kinds of characters who can do that well, to your point, such as the Brigadier. Brigadier does act in a very similar capacity to him, but I feel like some of that, on some level, derives from what Jamie set down.
I can see that.
But you're right. I don't want to get into the what defines a companion thing because it's honestly a not kind of a nonsense argument.
Yeah.
Because it's one of the things that seems like it's really obvious, but as we just pointed out, as soon as you start digging into it, it becomes endlessly recursive, and ultimately comes down to figuring out which subgenre of punk your 3-man band in your garage fits into. It's like, does like you said, does Luther Stewart count as a companion? Does K9 count as a companion? K9 didn't come across the TARDIS just free will. The Doctor kind of just stole him,
Did he built some of him?
And then he built another one. Like, does it building a companion qualify? I mean, he built 2 companions by that rationale. He also built Chameleon. We don't talk about that much, but he built him too, did he?
No. The
Does he
Master
build
built
him?
Chameleon.
Well, okay, someone
And
built him,
then the Fifth Doctor stole him.
right?
And then it broke down because they couldn't afford the effect.
Is the Master a companion? Missy
For
can certainly
Capaldi.
Missy qualifies now,
Yeah. See,
which means
so
retroactively the Master counts.
it is endlessly difficult to nail that
Right,
down.
right.
But my point was that when you were saying a very like limiting factor of that, then that would have discredited all the unit people and what they'd done. And I was
No, that's
just
fair.
trying to highlight those differences
No,
and
that's fair.
bring that into light.
It was a good shout.
What is
But I
your
mean,
episode if people want to start with the Troughton era? If they say, I want to see the second Doctor because Eddie Webb told me he is the bestest of the best, and I should start with.
and honestly, I thought this was going to be easy when I said it, but now I'm here. It's actually kind of hard because like
Yep.
my every time I think of one, I'm like, but that's a problem because of this, or that's a problem because of that. The moon base is probably the okay. So and this is the other problem we didn't really talk about much is that so much of early Troughton is gone. Right,
Yeah.
it's just missing. For all the missing episodes, there's a huge glut between very end of Hartnell to like the first season of Troughton is I think half of the episodes are unavailable.
And some of them have been redone as audio or sort of web series, so you can
Right,
get the essence of them, but you don't actually get to enjoy them for what they were.
right. And to be honest, I've not watched any of that. That's one of the things I'm planning to do is that because the nice thing about the BBC iPlayer is that they've actually licensed all of the animated reconstructions, so you can watch them in order with all the animated reconstructions interposed with them.
Nice.
So I do actually want to. That's one of the reasons why I'm doing this. So I will eventually watch those and watch like Daleks go to Victorian England and travel through time through mirrors because reasons. That's apparently a story that exists in the Troughton era that I've not seen.
A
But
mirror is a reflective surface, Eddie. You can go through time and space with it.
right, and if you reflect it long enough, eventually it concentrates time and space because that's how that works. Obviously,
Because when the light hits it, it forms a laser beam, and that laser beam, if it has enough, I don't know. I'm just there's a hat,
freaking
and I'm
laser
pulling
beams.
stuff out of it.
But I mean, of all of that, I think probably the moon base is the best way to get a sense of Troughton. Although, man, the one where they go to the land of fiction is a very close second.
Hmm.
How about you? And why is it pyramids?
I'm not gonna lie. It is hard to beat Tomb of the Cybermen if you really want Troughton. That's why I
Mhm.
chose it. It is the pinnacle of Troughton. But if I had to pick something else, I would probably say the Invasion, because
Yeah,
you
that's
get
a good one.
the introduction, like you get the brig, you get early Benton, you get an insight to what's going to happen later. The episodes itself are pretty solid.
Yeah, Web of Fear's pretty good too. It's a bit nonsensical and does require you to understand at least something of a previous story, but it does recap why robotic yetis are a thing because that's you're fighting robot yetis in the London Underground because that's what you fucking do when you're Doctor Who. Goddammit.
I would say you definitely should not start with the Crotons. Is that it?
Oh god, the
The
Croton's
little
terrible.
box shaped aliens.
Right.
And if you want a Chris personal favorite that as a new viewer you should not watch, but I love so much because it is so bad, War Games. It is 10 episodes
My
of
god.
zaniness. You have companions that are companions, but they're not there. And it repeats itself somewhat throughout the 10 episode run.
10
But
episodes.
at the end, you get the Time Lords.
And like on the one hand, if you really want to recreate the suspense of not knowing when Time Lords were for a very long period of time, watching 10 episodes of the same thing over and over again will certainly replicate that experience at some level. But I don't know if it's worth the 10 minutes of payoff you get.
Oh, I love it. Love it. Because you get, oh, I forgot what he's called, like the war something another, like the war
War Master.
commander, whoever he is. Oh,
No.
it is so
Is
good.
it the War
It's so
Master?
bad.
Yeah, I think it's War Master.
Perfect.
Yeah. And is he a Time Lord or not? Whatnot.
But for
So yeah,
good,
no.
Tomb of Starman, the invasion.
Right. Yeah. Okay. So we already talked a little bit about this already, but the John Pertwee incarnation of the Doctor, who was portrayed third on television.
You mean James who?
James Who, yes. And then technically speaking, he is now the fourth chronologically incarnation of the Doctor because we talked about the movies. So I'm just going to stop doing that now. It's just irritating. But yeah, John Pertwee, you're right. You mentioned this earlier. The concept of leading man in terms of, from a production standpoint, is something Troughton established, but leading man in terms of how you watch him on television is it's
Yep,
100% John Pertwee. John Pertwee
right
is
here.
the guy you watch the show for. Troughton was the guy who leads the show from an acting standpoint. Pertwee is you watch Doctor Who to watch John Pertwee. That is the leading man we're talking about here.
James Who, Action Who, whatever you want to call him, it is
Yes.
John Pertwee from start to finish.
Yeah. And also, this is the first time that the show radically reinvents itself, showing that this is a thing that can absolutely happen as many times as necessary, and certainly has.
And in color.
And in color, yeah, it's color now. Well, now we're shooting on film as well as on videotape. We have the idea of, again, we talked about this earlier, but moving from companion to different kind of supporting cast, and a relatively large supporting cast, all things considered.
It's the Pertwee era is just good. Like before, there were gems that you could sort of find in the other two Doctors.
Right.
But the Pertwee era on a whole is just solidly good. They figured out how to film it. They figured out some of their script mechanics they wanted to stick with. They figured out some of the mythology, which mythology is an important part of Doctor Who for me as a viewer. As someone that likes those little bits to like piece it all together and then fan theory on the side, I enjoy it. But the banter between the Brigadier and the Doctor, exceptional. Like that is what nails it in and grabs your attention before the Doctor eventually leaves Earth to go wander off in the galaxy with Jo. Then
Right.
Sarah Jane.
Yeah, and I mean, it's also the first time we have the Doctor who doesn't have a directional relationship. It's like the Doctor and his 1, 2, 3 companions, and they have a relationship with him, and that's pretty much it. This is the first time we have Doctor Who with a web of relationships. So a Doctor and the Brigadier has a different relationship with Jo Grant. Jo Grant has a different relationship with the Doctor, different relationship with Benton. They all have a relationship with the Master, and those relationships are slightly different. Depending on which fan fiction forums you go to, there's maybe very explicit relationships. Who knows?
The Master, who was an official part of the cast,
He's a
because he
supporting
was
member.
there
I mean,
so much.
frankly, until the very end, he was showing up just as much as you to people. So as far as I'm concerned, he was a supporting cast member.
I know, and that was part of that was probably part of Roger Delgado's problem. He was like, I am not a full cast member on that show. Please give me other work.
Right. Exactly. So yes, I mean, I think I agree with your points. I think of it as the floor of quality raises on Pertwee era, right? Like you said, there's some watchable stuff in the first era. There's some genuine gems in the second era, but also a lot of dreck in both of those. The worst Pertwee stories are at least entertaining television to watch.
Yes, like the one with the big gold-eyed aliens.
Yes,
even the Autons. All right,
right.
I don't know if I said it before, but I hate the Autons. I hate them with like a passion. I just why, Eddie?
How can you hate Robert Holmes's very blatant attempt to talk about how crass commercialism will destroy us all?
Oh, because I'm raised in a capitalist society.
Right. That's why you mentioned mythology, because this is the first season which kind of starts to mine its own mythology a little more than just let's bring Daleks back because of ratings, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's the first time it's like let's actually reference things we did in the past in a meaningful, intelligent way. But in the midst of all of this, it's also making mythology purely for pot contrivances, and that sticks around forever. So it's this weird kludge of respect for what came before, but also whatever needs to get the job done. So, like, and a perfect example of that is the Three Doctors, which is probably the one I'm going to choose for my watching point. Is that it is one hand, like we have a 10th anniversary, and so we're going to bring the Time Lords back, the thing that we referenced before, and we're going to talk about we're going to bring the two actors, doctors back to show them off, and we're going to give them at least the one that's well enough, or to give them acting moments with his former cast members and really showcase them and really respect what came before. But also, we're going to make this entirely new Time Lord and just put a bunch of nonsense about how Gallifrey works that we're going to invalidate 10 years later and then try to retroactively make them both work simultaneously 15 years after that, because Omega is a goddamn vortex of continuity.
I love it.
I
Oh,
love it too. It's what I'm here for. But also, it was completely made from like going, I don't know. They fight an evil Time Lord, I guess. That's not the Master. It's so clear that's what's happening here. It's just here's just a reason to have the Doctors do cool shit, and we have to raise the stakes, and also the Time Lords, and it's just this perfect balance of we respect the stuff that happened before that was made for narrative contrivances, while also making narrative contrivances for this story that future writers are going to have to them respectfully. It's wonderful. I love it.
and part of the joy of doing how we did it for this season, where we're watching equivalent 2 episodes of each of the Doctors, is it gives us glimpses of the personalities and how the personalities shifted from Doctor to Doctor.
Mm-hmm.
And it was interesting to see that of all of them that we watched, the most authoritarian Doctor is the third Doctor.
Yeah,
For all the
yeah,
bluster and how he pushes against the Brigadier, if the Brig wasn't there, he'd be almost doing what the Brig does.
yeah, yeah. He's definitely the most conservative ideologically of the Doctors.
With an
And
action bent, which is an interesting take.
well, I mean, James Bond is a relatively conservative character too, at least in the original incarnation. So it's not that far of a
But
stretch.
James Bond is a tool that is used by the government and pointed at things. The Doctor is an active person that chooses to do these things.
Right, right. I'm just saying it's like the blending of conservative pop icon and action hero is not that far removed. But you're right. The Doctor is a weird choice for that, and certainly it's one of those eras of the show that like I'm not. I enjoy watching. This goes back to the earlier point. I enjoy watching Berkeley. Like I want to throw on a show, and a Pertwee show is one of the ones that are up there in terms of I'll just put it on and watch and I'll enjoy
Yeah.
it. But I don't like thinking about them because when I do, it leads to some really uncomfortable ways.
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, it's like, hey, Pertwee's really fun and he's really charismatic and I'm really enjoying this stuff and nonsense. But did he just nuke an entire civilization of dinosaurs? Because I think he just nuked an entire civilization of dinosaurs.
And so an episode I will definitely not be choosing for this Doctor is The Planet of Spiders. Because it's how Pertwee ends. You don't want to start a new Doctor with like how their final episode. But at that point in time, he'd been the Doctor for so long that they said, whatever you want to do, John, for this last episode, do it. There is an entire episode of him jumping in different vehicles for the longest fucking chase ever.
God, yes.
And I hate it. If I rewatch it, I fast forward through that point. It's like, all right, I can't watch this anymore. I didn't do that for the Daleks, even for Hartnell, and they were in that fucking tunnel for like 3 episodes. I watched it. I was like,
Right.
maybe he'll get over the ravine this time. Oh, Ian, throw that rope, buddy. Come on, that's like a foot. You can throw that rope.
Come on, Ian. You can do it. You can do it, buddy. Yeah, and that's what's interesting about Pertwee for me too is also that this is the first time the Doctor's played more than 3 years long, and there's kind of almost a canard now of the Doctor lasts about 3 years, but you can kind of see that like where maybe that's true because by around the 4th and 5th season of Pertwee, he's kind of just going through he's not going through the motions per se in terms of he's not doing his best because he is, but a lot of it is just Pertwee doing Third Doctor stuff because that's what Third
Yeah.
Doctor does now.
Part of that, though, from my understanding, is that Troughton told Davison, don't stay there for more than 3 years.
Right, right. That's where it
And then
officially
that,
came from.
yeah, then that sort of became a running thing for some of the Doctors afterwards. Some of them didn't have a choice. But
Right, but
we'll get there when we get there.
yeah, but I'm retroactively saying I could see in hindsight why you could look to Pertwee's era going, okay, maybe there's some value and maybe not. He may have stayed a little too long. Maybe overstayed his welcome a bit too long.
All right. So, what episode would you choose for the Pertwee?
So, I mean, I said the Third Doctor, Three Doctors, and I think in terms of a good story it is, but it's not really good at showcasing Pertwee specifically, right?
Mm-hmm.
So it's funny because like when you pitched it initially, I was like, I don't know if I watched that, but in retrospect, honestly, I think Inferno is a really good one. It's first of all, it shows you how episodes of Doctor Who should run,
Yeah.
because it's way better paced than 7 episodes of Hartnell. But also, it is the right balance of science fiction nonsense and spy nonsense that is perfect Pertwee.
Since you stole mine,
I know.
I wasn't going to take it again though because that would have been wrong. Given the fact that Pertwee broke down into like two specific eras, I'm going to choose two Pertwee episodes.
Okay, that's fair.
So, for his time with Unit, I'm thinking, oh, maybe that one. All right, time with Unit, The Ambassadors of Death.
Oh, interesting.
Just
It's a
because I
very
think it would
hipster
be a good
choice.
way to introduce people. It's early on in that run, so you still get some of the Unit stuff. You still get them kind of figuring out some things. It's solidly based there.
Yeah.
I almost went a colony in space, but that would have been like a not fair for me to do for like a Unit run. And
Yeah.
for later, The Time Warrior, because I love it. It's a historical piece.
Yeah.
It's got Sarah Jane. Like I think Sarah Jane's first adventure, and it deals with a lone alien somewhere, and that is always fun to do.
Yeah. And a perfect example of something that was introduced to do a story and becomes this mythology, because Santrons are just supposed to be generic alien gets stuck in the past, and now Santrons are definitely a thing.
Yeah, and I
Santarans,
felt
whatever.
that I owed our listeners one because I cheated with Hartnell, so I gave them two Pertwee.
That's fair. That's fair. It all works out. Speaking of doctors who went too long and fall into two rough eras, Tom Baker.
Did he have two or three eras at that
Well,
point?
I mean,
Because the
definitely
Gothic period
two,
feels
maybe
different.
three. Yeah.
Because it feels like there was a first part, like the Gothic period, and then the silly shenanigans.
I mean, so season one is okay. This first season is kind of an outlier. So if you do that, yeah, the kind of there's the Sarah Harry run,
Yeah.
there's the Sarah run, and then there's kind of everything else. Because yeah, the first few seasons were primarily done by Phil Hinchcliffe, and yeah, it was very much initially touching on more horror stuff, but then it leans pretty heavily into the gothic horror stuff. And then when Mary Waterhouse is like, nope, that's scaring kids because I'm a Tory and don't understand how television works. And then they had to pivot and go a different direction. Then you get the Graham Williams half, which is much funnier, and is just very different. But unlike Pertwee, where the show started to slide into the direction, it was pretty clear that Pertwee wasn't entirely on board with where it was drifting into. Tom Baker's like, cool, I'll just reinvent my character and go a different direction now. And so the divide feels a little stronger, because really it is there's an, and without overanalyzing this, it's nice that he leaves Sarah Jane behind. There's an entire story without any companions, so he has room to kind of reinvent his character a little bit on Gallifrey before picking up and going in this new direction.
Yeah.
So even though it was a happenstance as to how that played out, it's a nice the Fatal Assassins have a nice break point between those two eras, and so it becomes funnier and a little goofier, and the sci-fi becomes a little more nonsense. But the show's acknowledging that as opposed to earlier, where Baker was tamping down slightly his humor and intentionally using it to counterpoint the horror of the story for good effect.
From the classic Doctors, has there been any other Doctor that has been to Gallifrey as much as Tom Baker's Doctor?
I think Peter Davidson may be tied. If you
Okay.
count the Five Doctors, Arc of Infinity, I think there's one more that he goes to Gallifrey.
Okay. Because I was
But
thinking
otherwise,
about it.
I mean, we really have to get down to like episode count, and if you consider the Five Doctors to be one long movie or 3 episodes. So we're really kind of into the let's compare the runtimes level of it. But between those two, no.
Okay.
Very after that, it drops. It goes back down very very significantly.
Because I remember like the Fatal Assassin Invasion of Time, I think Baker had one more on Gallifrey. I don't remember off the top of my
I
head
know
right
there was
now.
one where he was running around his TARDIS interiors, but they didn't figure it out that everything was Rondell's, and so he literally just goes from the control room to like someone's basement to a corridor they found on the set one day.
So part of the reason that Baker Prinsley stayed so long, though, is that unlike the actors before him, he didn't have a career to really go back to. Doctor Who was what became his career.
Right.
And even afterwards, he didn't have the same sort of success that, well, Troughton and Pertwee did.
No, he basically got roles because he used to be Doctor Who.
Yes.
And he's been very, very open about that part of his life. So he, much like Hartnell, kind of clung on, and certainly, particularly the last season of his run, really shows that. And it, again, weirdly works because you have this very world-weary Doctor. And so if you look at the whole last season as kind of his epilogue, right? Like if you, although it's not, let me phrase that, it was intentional, like Tom Baker's leave at the end of the season. I don't believe the production team had their shit together enough to do it as an intentional season-long arc of the Doctor eventually dying. But you can look at it like that, and it kind of becomes a weird fourth era of the Fourth Doctor, this kind of just him in his maroon coat going through the motions until he finally makes one last sacrifice to save people he barely knows, which is very much the Doctor.
All right, I'm throwing your curveball now because
Okay.
Baker's run was so long. Three episodes.
Okay.
Making it easier too.
So, and I'll do is like I'll do the first half, second half, and then the final season because I actually do have a favorite final season. So the first era, I mean, Genesis is such a classic, but I almost think that's not a good starting point because there's a.
I'm in agreement with that. It's a great episode, but it's not necessarily the best one to start with.
Right. So I'm going to go with Pyramids of Mars for the first half because it's for this era of Doctor Who, weirdly respectful of foreign cultures. But it's basically just here's the Mummy, but with Doctor Who, and it does. Aside from some extremely boring video game shit near the end of the story, it's actually pretty well paced.
Wow. All right, then I'll tell my next one from the
Okay.
start here. I'm going to go with the Ark in Space.
Yeah,
It's the
it's a
second
really
one.
good one.
It's Sarah, Harry, and the Doctor, and the cast is small enough that you really get to know those characters and feel their emotions as they go through it, and they are working together as a team really well right there. That's before Harry becomes irrelevant.
Right. Yeah. No, it's the one moment where like Harry could have been a really solid action hero character.
Yeah.
For the second half, I mean, there's so much good Romana stuff. I think I'm gonna go City of Death. It's kind of the easy choice, but it is Douglas Adams being very Douglas Adams, but it's also very clearly Lala Ward and Tom Baker just having the time of their life in Paris, and it really comes across on screen.
True. All right. Well, I personally love the Robots of Death. That is not going to be my pick, but I had to give it a shout out because it's so much fun. It's going to be the Stones of Blood.
Oh, wow. Okay.
You get my favorite Romana, who I think is a great companion, and that's her almost being not on par with Tom Baker, because at this point, Tom Baker's not going to let anyone be on par with Tom Baker.
No.
With Tom Baker, you get a glimpse of the TARDIS. You know there's some sort of mission they're on, but you also get to see aliens interacting with Earth itself and history. And then you get the cool trial scene at the end that Doctor Who has not done anything, I think, to replicate that. The new 14th Doctor played on it a little bit, but he didn't.
There's an homage to it, which is nice.
Didn't pull it, and that was magic. Like that scene at the end is like almost the pinnacle of Doctor Who.
Yeah. For the amount of times the Doctor's been on trial, there's only one time where he's been meaningfully the prosecution.
Yeah.
And it was that was yeah. No, that's a great pick.
I almost picked it for our run, but I was like,
that's yeah. I mean, honestly, it's funny. Like, as much as I give the Key of Time season stick, there's a lot of really strong bangers there. It's just there's a couple of stories that are really not good in the middle of it. It's a problem.
Yeah, yeah. Like the Androids of Tara isn't great. The Power of Kroll sucks.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
Sucks.
yeah, totally.
Last
And
one.
then I am actually blanking on the name, but I'm quickly Googling while I'm talking. Totally not doing that. But in the final season, like I said, there's lots of kind of uh, there's this almost repeating theme of death that I think was semi unintentional. But the best resonance of the theme of that season and also what we know is going to happen to Doctor in the future, combined with the fact that it was a script from a different season that got jammed in here because they needed it, State of Decay, plus also space
Mm.
vampires. I mean, it's such the right balance of let's try to play Doctor Who seriously with a concept that in no way, shape, or form could possibly be played seriously.
You stole mine, Eddie, but I'll let it go. Ah, and go with this one might be a little tougher for new viewers, but the Keeper of Traken.
I don't think it's that tough. I mean, it introduces Nissa.
Well, it introduces Nissa, but you also get this weird thing about Tremus Master, so you don't really necessarily know who the other master is, but it is conveyed, I think, throughout the story. But you get that sense of impending doom. So you'd have almost like a 2-part movie that you get to watch if you watch those. You'd watch the Keeper of Traken, which builds it up and everything else, and then you have the sequel that would be Legopolis as a follow-up.
Yeah. Honestly, I'm with you. I feel like Legopolis works better if you watch that before it.
Yeah,
Legopolis on its own just kind of seems like the Doctor's just fucking around doing nothing and then she dies. But
yeah.
having Keep Talking before it, it's the, oh, you actually barely know these people and you're doing this. That makes a lot more sense.
Any final thoughts on the Baker era?
No, I was going to move into Peter Davidson, who for me was definitely of the Doctors that I radically reinvented my opinion of. Davidson was very much up there. I'd always kind of liked him, but us sitting down and talking through Davidson made me realize how much I appreciate him as a doctor and how badly he has been treated by history as a doctor.
Mm-hmm.
Because, I mean, this is the era where soap opera gets introduced into Doctor Who badly, but it does get introduced into Doctor Who, which has never entirely left since then. They had such good companions that last for a long run, and also Perry's in there too.
Poor Purple Gilliam Brown.
Right, but I mean, like, yeah, Tara's team of 3 people that stuck around for 2.5 years, that's actually a really good run. And as much as people complain about how Turlo was handled and whatnot, the point is that they were kind of committed to this, again, much like the Pertwee era, this is extended supporting cast.
And I've already made a lot of my feelings known about the Fifth Doctor. I enjoyed the Fifth Doctor's run when it happened. I still enjoy it now.
Mm-hmm.
And I like the fallibility of the character continuously. It is not something that we talked about on the show. They did well to handle because they weren't expecting the fan reaction they got. And then that sort of exacerbated Davidson's leaving along with bad scripts. But I liked what he was doing. I liked what Janet Fielding and everyone else was doing too. It felt good and fun to watch, regardless of their success or failure.
Exactly, right. In terms of stories, much like you were saying earlier, like in terms of stories to introduce someone, Caves of Enerjani is terrible because it's literally at the end, and it's one of the best ones. So, although there's some deeply problematic issues with it from a modern perspective, I do think Kinda is still a really good introductory story. I think it does a good job of highlighting most of the companions, giving them something to do, which not many of the Davidson stories manage. It's a good example of what makes Davidson a strong doctor in that he's not as bombastic as the previous 2 doctors, but he can convince people. He has an emotional intelligence that those doctors lacked, and you see that more in stories like Kinda. And also has a giant snake puppet, and who can be mad about that? Answer: Doctor Who
As you
fans.
took the best episode for ones for introducing someone, I am going to go in a slightly different direction and go with Frontios.
Really? I thought you were going to go for Enlightenment. That's why I left it open for you.
Nope, nope, nope. I love Enlightenment. That is a horrible episode for a new person to start with.
Oh, true. That's the end of the Black Guardian arc, isn't it? Yeah.
But Frontios is a solid standalone episode. You get like this alien that kind of controls gravity that he has to deal with, and you get the desperation of the Fifth Doctor running around trying to fix things.
Okay, yeah, and it has a nice amount of sci-fi nonsense. It goes to the end of the universe because it's a totally thing that has an end. Yeah.
Yep. And it's a great jump on point, and it could go anywhere afterwards.
Also, another thing that was homaged in the 14th Doctor specials, the end of the universe.
You took my good one. That was a hard one. Whew.
That was a hard one. Okay.
If I didn't know Davison so well, I wouldn't have been able to pull that off.
Well, it's going to get worse, my friends, because we're about to move into Colin Baker.
God, can we just say the Big Finish stuff and call it a day for this one?
So yeah, Colin Baker is honestly Doctor Who at its worst as television, right? I mean, let's just be straight up. It's like as much love as we have for Colin Baker, as much love as we have for the Sixth Doctor retroactively, and both those things are true. Very little of it is on the screen. It is Purple Alien Brown is frankly one of the worst companions. Not to Nicola Bryant's problem at all. It's absolutely purely how she's written and frankly how she's shot. Her role in the show is very clear and is not for her acting ability, and that is a shame and unfortunate.
And you have the showrunner and the producer that are at definite odds with each other, fighting
Right.
for control of the show while they're having to battle against people saying it's too violent, and the script editors wanting it to be more violent, and then Baker stuck in the middle of all that too.
Right. Baker is trying his damnedest. The Trial of Time, as we talked about, does a lot to try to salvage it and does a reasonably okay job at it, but just not good enough. And it's cut short because of his firing. So yeah, if you really want to experience the Eighth Doctor, or sorry, the Sixth Doctor, frankly, Big Finish is a better route for you because Colin Baker's been playing that character now for almost 25 years at Big Finish. He's had lots of time to reinvent the character, but even that, he reinvents it within about 2 or 3 stories. So like he's been playing this new version of the Sixth Doctor for most of that time. It doesn't take a lot of work for him to do it because he's getting, frankly, better scripts. And also, Nicola Bryant does a better job because her physical attributes are no longer the center point of her character. So they have to do something with her, and they turn out that something is give her actual dialogue and a reason to be in the story, and she does a good job at that. Weirdly enough, she's actually a really good actor. So yeah, if you're going to do it, honestly, check out. My suggestion would be Jubilee, which is a story that the episode
We are
Dalek was
too
based off
much
of.
alike, Eddie. Now I got to Google because that was the one I had in mind. God, we're like literally one big brain now.
I mean, there's all the if you want, I can change it because actually there's another one.
No, you chose it. I'm trying to remember Sixth Doctor Big Finish Audio Adventures now.
So no, Jubilee is, although it is a story that the Ninth Doctor episode Dalek was based off of, it's a very different story, and it is. I was surprised when I heard that that was based off of it because to me it's so distinctly a Sixth Doctor thing because his arrogance and his knowledge are used against him in a way that is genuinely heartbreaking. And also, it is a fantastic send up of the crass over commercialization of the Daleks. So it's just a fantastic story.
As Eddie took my first choice, my second choice, which I think will surprise Eddie, is going to be Doctor Who and the Pirates.
That was the one I was going to take if I was going to give you that one. Doctor Who and the Pirates. Actually, I love Doctor Who and Pirates
because it is great, it is funny, it is floppish, it is literally Doctor Who and Pirates. And I'm trying to remember now off the top of my head, there's even like a singing musical bit in it.
There is several.
And it has Evelyn Smythe, who is an exceptional companion that's introduced in the Big Finish Adventures. Yep. Both of those, great choices. But Eddie, we do not get away that easy. We gave them great suggestions. Now give them bad suggestions from the TV series, and you get to start.
Time Lash.
The best you can give them based on these bad episodes. How about that? Let me rephrase.
Oh, okay. All right. Well, we already covered Vengeance Navarros. So I'm actually not going to do that. Actually, I'm trying to think. There's the one of the key to time that, hmm, not key time, Trial of Time Lord, but Mind Warp. That's what I'm thinking of. It's not great. The Vervoids are rubbish, but it's interesting in the sense of how do you do a in media res Doctor Who story? And because no one knows who Mel is, the fact you don't know who Mel is actually not a down point to it. The fact that there's just this random companion that shows up is actually part of watching the story. So it's one of the few times where it's like it's a good introduction just because you are just as confused as the characters are. But I am seriously that noise you hear in the background is me scraping the bottom of the barrel.
All right. So, as much as I would like to say Terror of the Vervoids because it has Honor Blackman, I'm not. I'm going to go with Mark of the Ronnie because you get another bit of
Oh,
Kato Mara as a Ronnie teaming up with Anthony
oh,
Anili as the Master.
I should have picked that one. Oh, that was good.
And while the
Good.
episode itself is kind of rubbish, the two of them together, freaking great to watch.
No, Kate Amara is fantastic because she understands the brief. I'm going to be an evil Time Lord and chew the goddamn scenery, and boy howdy, her saliva is all over that set.
And it is that she and the Master make that work. And I'm so sad that Ronnie has never come back. But at the same time, I'm not because I don't know if there's an actress who could have pulled it off, except for maybe Michelle Gomez, who unfortunately
Yeah.
is now another incarnation of the Master, which is fine. But she would have been a great Ronnie too.
And plus, you can't be mad about the fact that the entire plot involves evil sentient trees. You could absolutely be mad about that.
Oh, I love it. Love it. 19th
All
century
right.
industrial with Time Lords. Oh.
So we're going to move from. Oh, actually, before we move on, if you. I'm not talking about the artistic value of it, I'm talking about purely your entertainment as a viewer. If you had to choose between a good or let me phrase that. If you had to choose between watching a random First Doctor story or a random Sixth Doctor story, which would you pick?
First Doctor.
Okay, so Sixth Doctor is below the First Doctor in your opinion in terms of television.
In terms of enjoyment, yes.
Okay.
Because there's a higher probability that one of the First Doctor's episodes would give me something at least decent than
Okay.
there is for
All
the
right.
Sixth Doctor.
All right. That's interesting. I would probably agree with you actually on that. Which is such a shame, but yeah, it's just not a good run television. You could see why the show is almost canceled because it kind of needed to be canceled. Luckily, it
But
didn't.
it wasn't because of the successful song Doctor in Distress that changed the world. They saw that
Oh
song and they
yeah.
knew the Doctor needed me. Everyone ran to their phones and called the BBC and sent them money.
Yes. But I asked that question because that means Zach can now say that we're segueing from our least favorite portion of Doctor Who probably to our most favorite portion of Doctor Who, which
Absolutely.
is Sylvester motherfucking McCoy.
Mm-hmm.
Oh my god. We there's a reason why we spent a little more time on this era of the show than others. Not just because it's the end of the run, but that also is the reason. But it's even the bad stories are still fun. I mean, people really bang on the season 24 and the Mel and Doctor era, but even that stuff, it's still just fun to watch. I still have a not at all secret love for Paradise Towers.
Oh,
I think that sentient cleaning robots and color coded girl gangs are just amazing.
Red Kangs. Red Kangs are the best.
Red Kangs are the best. I've been told that. But I mean, it's to go back to our earlier metric, like I've actually proven this. There was a when I was in the U.S. still, there's a free television thing that plays for a while. I had an entire Doctor Who channel that just plays random episodes. I mean, they're not random. The story is cohesive, but it just plays a bunch of Doctor Who back to back, 24 hours. And when I was in the process of moving, I was like, I want to watch something that I'm comfortable with. I just turned that on, and it happened to have a random, I think it was Time in the Ronnie, just
Yeah.
popped on, and it was a random special Murray episode, and I watched it straight through. Like even the ones that I like the least, if it were to show up randomly on television, I would still absolutely watch it because Sylvester McCoy really, not only really got what the Doctor was, but also did the Patrick Troughton-esque feat of balancing two very different expectations of the Doctor from the scriptwriter and just blending them. Because it's like the one half, it's like Doctor needs to be silly and do malaprisms and fall over and be funny looking, but also be a secret manipulator that is trying to play games with God. And Mr. McCoy's like, cool, I got it, and just does it.
Well, also, he does all that, but I think also part of that might be the fact that he got the role during the auditions for being able to read one of the Doctor's speeches, and that speech had like that darkness to it, so that might have informed McCoy as an actor that, hey, I have to do this funny thing, but I also need to be able to do this.
True.
So from the initial go, he understood the mission, which is always important.
Right. And that's looking forward slightly. That's actually one of the reasons why I like Christopher Eccleston's run as Doctor, because it is the closest I've seen to McCoy of balancing the funny and dark in the Doctor successfully. He does the opposite arc, which makes sense. Like McCoy kind of starts off silly and slides into the darker Doctor. Eccleston's the opposite. He started dark and slides into finding life again, and that's more of an explicit character arc for him. One of the few times the Doctor gets an actual character arc. But also, much like McCoy, is kind of one of the reasons why it's so good is because it's so short, and in a way, that's a shame.
And just for all of our listeners, I don't know if we might have mentioned it, and the reason we spent so much time on McCoy also is that we considered our Doctor Who run at first time just to be
Yeah,
a run about the McCoy Doctor, nothing else.
yeah, that was the original
And we
plan.
went back and forth for a long time.
hmm And I think if we ever revisit this, I guarantee you we'll probably do some Seventh Doctor stories, and one of them will probably be Ghostlight, because we had arguments about that. The other one will probably be Enlightenment, frankly, if we do another run
Yeah.
of this.
Those are both ones that were on my list that Eddie said,
Right.
ah! Although I'm torn because I also have a secret love for the greatest show in the galaxy. Nothing beats a space circus.
That's true. I mean, how can you go wrong with alien space werewolves?
And the Doctor battling the gods of Ragnarok. Oh, like
Yeah.
the McCoy era is so good even before we had like Ace. And if I'm not gonna lie,
Yeah.
Delta the Bannerman is watchable.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, like, if you like pick your top 10 McCoy stories, realizing there's only like 12, Dalton Bannerman's not going to be in that list, you know? But at the same time, if it's like, oh, hey, I'm bored and Dalton Bannerman's on, I'm going to watch it all the way through.
The only one that I may or may not watch if it was on would potentially be Time in the Ronnie.
I see.
Kate O'Mara was awesome, but the episode is so bad.
But I
So bad.
mean,
But it's also written in like 3 days by the
yeah,
Bakers.
yeah, it was an impossible brief. And basically, it was we got for something on there real fast. McCoy's just learning the role. Oh, God, there's Kate O'Mara out there. And that was pretty much the right call to make. Because Bonnie Langford didn't quite know enough about her role yet to figure things out. And that's the other frustrating thing is like, in retrospect, I mean, because Ace is so fantastic and Sophie Aldred just dominated the McCoy era so well that it's very easy, and certainly when I was younger, I absolutely did dismiss Mel as like the lesser companion. It's like, oh God, Mel's terrible, Ace is amazing, and that and The second part is true. Ace is amazing, but over the years, particularly since she's been coming back on television, I have grown to appreciate Mel more because I realized on I've not rewatched it, but I'm thinking about that season that Mel's you know, the actress finally figuring out Mel as a character and how that would work right at the time she gets written out. So, and again, the Big Finish audios, Mel is given a lot better work. She's sliding into the role of trying to get the Doctor whose head is too in the clouds to focus on what's in front of him, and that's actually a really solid role. Ace provides a different balancing factor because she's so headstrong. The Doctor has to pull himself out of his grand schemes to make sure she doesn't run off in danger and get killed. But it's the same extremely rough character role. And so Mel being like come on, Doctor, we need to actually talk to the Kangs and maybe treat them like human beings instead of just wandering off and trying to punch an alien telepath in the face. And he's like, oh, yeah, yeah. I don't know. I'll do some funny tricks and here's some quarters. Go, Mel, go talk to them. It's actually a nice dynamic that they're trying to figure out. So, of his two companions, that they're both really strong in very different ways.
Well, also for Mel, originally the writers were, I think, trying to write the character of Mel because they knew that Bonnie Langford played, I forgot the name of the show now, but as a young, like as a kid actress, she played a character that was very reminiscent of like that sixth season where she was with the Doctor, sort of being like a nagging antagonist
Yeah.
to the
Mm-hmm.
male lead. She played that, I think, as a role when she was a kid, and they were writing almost that for her again for the Doctor Who. And by the
Right.
end of her run, they'd moved away from that, but then it was too late.
Yeah, and that's frustrating because like with the Sixth Doctor, the way he was being written, it makes sense to make someone who's a bit naggy because the Doctor was so egotistical. He needed someone to aggressively pop his balloon to get through to him. The Seventh Doctor didn't need that, and so she was quickly pivoting to how to evolve that character and her performance. And she had landed on just kind of emotionally intelligent nursemaid, something that kind of Clara fills the role in the modern series of trying to drag the Doctor into these smaller schemes, and I can understand the consequences of his actions. But again, like by the time she found that, yeah, Dragonfire happens, and it's really hard to miss that in the midst of Sophie Aldred just, as we talked before, completely reinventing companions.
Funnily enough that you mentioned Clara, Clara, now that you say that, really resonates with me, and I understand what you're saying. And that is also, I think, one of the reasons that Clara gets so much hate for the character that she was.
Yeah, I mean that, and also man children going, I don't want no woman telling me what to do.
Eh,
These are also
humans.
the same people who think that Rick and Morty in Rick and Morty, Rick is not the villain because Rick is absolutely the villain in Rick and Morty.
All right, episode. What episode of this run would you pick for a new viewer? I've never seen Doctor Who, and I want to catch the Seventh Doctor.
So, okay, it's Remembrance of the Daleks, right? I don't know why I'm hedging about this point. Remembrance of the Daleks is a really good introduction to Seventh Doctor because it hits all the high points. All the backstory is explained in the story, but also manages to neatly explain why the Doctor hates the Daleks. So it's actually, if it's your first Dalek story, which it was mine actually. Remembrance of the Daleks was my very first Dalek story. Genesis. I watched Genesis like 6 months later because that's how the PBS aired Doctor Who, just random episodes. But Remembrance really is a good starting point because it was one of my starting points.
I would actually say, and I know everyone's thinking I'm going to say Battlefield, but I'm not going to say Battlefield because we covered Battlefield. I'm
Yeah.
not going to say Ghostlight because Ghostlight is a horrible episode to start with.
No, yeah, I would agree.
Greatest Show in the Galaxy.
Okay, yeah, it's actually not a bad one.
Because it has a lot of comical beats. You've got the spacey nonsense, but you also get to see the Doctor once again doing what the Doctor does and winning with the battle of words.
Mm-hmm.
And you get the manipulation aspect if you keep watching because Ace is doing stuff behind the screen while he's distracting everyone.
Right, right, yeah. And then, yeah, is it not an era? It was 90 minutes of television. Paul McGann was on our screens. And okay, we have talked a lot of stick about the movie. We probably will never review it because it would just be 2 hours of bitching. That said, someone reminded me of a clip from the movie that is 100% the Eighth Doctor in a nutshell, which is the Doctor going up to a police officer, offering him jelly babies, convincing him to eat jelly baby, and during that he pickpockets the cop, takes a gun, and says, "Don't move or I will shoot myself." And I'm like, that's just the bonkers nature of early eight is kind of encapsulated in that. But much like the Sixth Doctor, the only way we ever saw what Paul McGann was capable of was in audio. And again, doing it for 23 years now, I suppose 25, slightly less than Colin Baker's been doing it. But he absolutely shines in audio. And frankly, in the 10-minute YouTube clip he got in the new series.
Yeah. Night of the Doctor was excellent. Like that
Mm-hmm.
was his best. That was the best TV bit we've ever had of the Eighth Doctor.
Yeah, and it shows that he can get across the fact that I kind of have to remind myself that Night of the Doctor is only 10 minutes long because it feels like a whole Doctor Who story. And it's so compressed, and he just crams so much doctorness in that extremely short period of time.
All right, Eddie. Then what is the big finish audio adventure for the Eighth Doctor that you would suggest people start with?
As tempting as it is to go with some of the Charlie era stuff, I'm actually going to suggest the Lucy Miller run, and I cannot think of the first story for the Lucy Miller run. So I'm going to look that up right now. The downside, I proposed this game and I should have prepared, but I was a sucker. See, if I had prepared, I would know
I was
this.
unprepared for the game. You caught me off guard with the game, Eddie.
Right.
How's that feel? It only took
Blood of
us
the
2.5 years.
Daleks. Blood of the Daleks is a
Okay.
2-part story. It's across the 2 discs, but it is the only other part of the Eighth Doctor era where you have to you know nothing about the Eighth Doctor, and you don't need to. Everything that happens in there is explained. I would normally suggest Dark Eyes, but you kind of have to know how the Lucy Miller run ends to understand where Dark Eyes begins. So it's not a good starting point. So yeah, Blood of the Daleks is probably, and again, it also has Daleks in it, so it's a decent starting point.
And for me, I'm going to go the exact opposite of Eddie. I think the best one to literally start with for the Eighth Doctor is going to be Storm Warning.
Yeah.
It is a solid episode. You get the Doctor starting out by himself, has a shenanigans for an adventure, and you get to meet Charlie, and it's a solid Doctor Who episode.
Mm-hmm. But to be honest, as much as in the game, and it was fun to do the game, I think one of the nice things about classic Doctor Who specifically is that there are very few absolutely horrible stories to start with, right? A lot of it is reasonably self-contained. There might be small nods or references to a status quo here and there. There might be a character that's presented as if you know who they are without a ton of context. But there's a reason why these stories were sold out of order on VHS for a long period of time and did really well. They're all kind of sort of maybe self-contained movies in a lot of ways.
Yeah. All right. Have
So
we
that's it.
officially finished Doctor Who? Are we done? Are we about to regenerate into a new season of something?
No, we have one more Doctor Who. No, we're not. No, we're done with Doctor Who. So next episode, we're going to take another bit of a break because while we were recording all of this, X-Men '97 premiered on Disney Plus, and even though we said we're done with superheroes, we're never going to talk about superheroes again, and specifically, we both said we're done with the MCU and Disney Plus. But I think both of our collective nostalgia for that original cartoon beat us over the head correctly, and Disney has identified we are the target market for this cartoon.
So, Eddie, whose zany idea was it to do yet another superhero thing?
It was yours, so let's blame where blame is due.
As always, endless ideas, and fortunately for me, Eddie's willingness to indulge my I don't know how I want to phrase it. I could go really 18 ways with it. My wacky ideas. We'll just stick with that one.
There you go. Although to be fair, like it wasn't a hard sell for me because I was like, oh, this is the Storm and Mohawk era, which is one of my favorite eras of the X-Men. So Doctor,
Yes,
wow.
Doctor Storm.
Yes, yes, because so those of you who don't know, the X-Men original animated series was done in the 90s. It was a weird kind of remix of original X-Men stories and 90s era X-Men stories. Next 97 is basically the next season of that, so it picks up right where the original show left off, and it's going through more explicitly some of the later 90s storylines of the comic book, which are the reasons why I was excited about it, because it is hitting some of the good points of the 90s era, including Life Death, which is one of my favorite arcs
It's also
of.
pulling some stuff from the 80s too, though, as it would
Yeah,
do.
yeah, and that's what's interesting about it, is because like it's also, yeah, because of the Storm with the Mohawk thing. That's very much the 80s. Oh, what was the artist's name? Paul something. But yeah, that was the era of like Colossus wearing the big red suit, and Rogue had the black bodysuit with the off-the-shoulder green tank top, and it just, ugh.
And so we're going to do a two episode beat on that. One of which will tell you it's going to be the first 4 episodes of the series X-Men 97. And then a special something about X-Men 97.
What is a special something, Chris?
We will not say. They must wait until it happens.
Okay. However, if, well, by the time you're listening to this, it'll already be over. But if you were on our Discord when you're listening to this, before you're listening to this, you will know what that thing is, because we're going to be announcing it's a special Discord only thing that we will then put into the feed. So if you're mad that you missed this special thing that we're not telling you about right now, you should sign up for Discord.
Maybe we should put out a special episode in the middle of the week that's just like 15, 20 seconds and say, oh my God, did you know we're going to do X or Y on this date?
That involves a level of planning that I don't know. You'll find, by the time you're listening to this, you'll know if we've done this or not.
As always, we're in real time figuring out what we're going to do.
Right. And then I will say after that, we are going to stick with comic books, because it's about time to do another Speechless run. We won't tell you what it is yet. We'll leave that to your imagination, but we're going to do another run of Speechless, because last time we did it was Armor Wars, and then we recorded that before I moved to the UK. So that's how long
Jeez. Do you want to tell them what we're going to do after that Speechless run? As we are now planned,
Wow.
people.
Wow, we're
We've
that
got
far
plans.
ahead, aren't we? Oh my
Yeah,
gosh.
we got plans. It's something that Eddie has wanted to do for a long time. And
Yes.
I've jokingly pushed it off. We'll say, what about this, Eddie? What about this, Eddie? And
Right.
finally, we had our official Genreless board meeting. And Eddie's like, I am 50% of this podcast. And he flipped over our virtual table like coffee spilled everywhere. And then he said we're going to do a run about what?
Well, actually, I should mention, since we're talking about the board meeting, that I have actually bought out Lisa's shares of it, so now actually I own 60% of Genreless. So.
But fortunately, I've trademarked and copyrighted everything, so my vote still counts.
Damn it! The power struggle continues. No, we're going to do what I think of as a speed run through Sherlock Holmes, because there's a lot of Sherlock Holmes. And again, we'll talk more when we get there, but the basic idea is that we're going to try to hit roughly a decade every episode. So it's kind of a bit like we did with the classic Doctor Who run, is that we're going to do kind of really rough eras. So that was a prototype in a way for this. But it was a lot of fun and agonizing figuring out what we're going to cover for that. So I'm excited. We'll see how it goes.
And I will also say, I won't say what though, but we've also plotted out the mini break seasons in the middle of that long Sherlock run
Yes.
too. We're
Yes.
on it, people. We're professionals. We're ready to go.
Right. Now, of course, we say all this recognizing full well that, knowing us, we're probably will have changed our mind on some of this stuff before we get there. It's also the reason we're being vague, is because we may just say, you know what, we're going to do this other thing instead. So
Yeah.
Now that we've announced it, we're relatively committed to it. We'll
We're
see how
a
that
good
holds up.
70% committed.
We also to kind of segue into the promotional side of things, also have planned out our next few Patreon exclusive episodes. So if you're curious to find out what those are, and for the first time, one of them is not going to be a movie. It's actually going to be, or a single episode of television. It's going to be actually much more like we do in the normal podcast week or cover a few episodes of a thing. But it's a special thing. So if you want to find out what I'm talking about,
You know what?
yeah.
From when this drops, we would already have dropped that one. So
Oh, okay. All right.
I will say this one.
Fair
We're
enough.
going to cover the Fallout series that's coming
Right.
to Amazon Prime. The backers for the Patreon should have already have had it by 4 or 5 days before you get this. I'm super excited. I am a huge Fallout fan. It gives me a chance to talk about Fallout. Fallout as the IP that I want to own as a company that I've
Right.
never written for, and I'm very upset by that. So I'm going to talk about the television series.
Right. Right. And this was the trade I made to in exchange to being able to talk about Sherlock Holmes. It's like fine, we'll do Fallout, I guess.
As to talk about Sherlock, I was like, yeah, let's do it, man. Like, what are we doing first? Eddie, give me a structure. And he's like, there's too much. I was like, Eddie, structure. I had to make Eddie give structure. That
That's
is how
true.
excited he was about Sherlock.
And it's true. It's true. Actually, it was. That's a pretty not panned out. So yeah, we have a lot planned. We're definitely not going anywhere. And but I mean, yes. To go back to the beginning and to wrap it up, this was a long run. This was one of our longer runs, not the longest, obviously, but I don't think anything's gonna beat the superheroes run.
But I don't know.
But yeah, but we took a whatever. Point is, like that was 30 some episodes. This is not quite there yet. Um, so but it was good. It was fun. I'm glad we did this. I enjoyed it. I think after a good long break, I would like to come back and do some more of this. We may even do the new series. We don't know yet. But the truth is, as much as we love Doctor Who, this is not a Doctor Who podcast. We have lots of other stuff to talk about, and as you heard, we have tons of plans. That is only 50% of the plans that we have.
No.
There's a whole bunch of other stuff that we're still kicking around and talking about. And as Chris has often said, usually it's like I'll get them ping. I was like, what about this? What about this? What about this? And I'll go, yeah, sure, why not? We were talking about one right before we started recording, even. So we have a lot to talk about. So it's a good moment to kind of take a pause and say thank you all for listening. We joke about our listener, but we have been. I have very rare numbers, but occasionally I do and see them. We actually have been growing, which is nice. But I know that some people out there still enjoy what we're putting down because, to be honest, if we weren't recording this on a mic, these conversations are Chris and I would be having anyway.
Yeah. And part of the joy of doing it on mic, though, is that we help other people find new things.
Yes.
They enjoy media that we enjoy, and then it gives us a chance to talk to those people. They want to come and find us. It's all about, at the end of the day, I'm going to say it, Eddie. I've been waiting to do this for a long time. Family and community. So it's a thing. And television and media itself is how we see ourselves and how we share stories. And as creatives and designers, we're storytellers.
Absolutely. And it has been genuinely a joy to, like, for example, someone in our Discord through this podcast found Forever Night and has been gleefully telling us about their experience watching Forever Night. And I love that. I love seeing people finding a new thing that they now love. And if we helped with that, that just makes us all worthwhile. So thank you so much for listening. We do appreciate that. If you want to help us with that, as I mentioned earlier, you should support the Darker Hue Patreon. Because you'll not only get bonus episodes, but you'll be giving Chris money. And Chris is the big fat piggy bank that I smack to occasionally pay for the costs of making this podcast. So thank you very much for doing that. And that's a great way to help contribute and causes to keep going on. But also simply buying books from Darker Hue Studios. Chris has some stuff in stock right now that he's trying to shift, if I remember correctly.
I do. I have some misprinted books that I've been sitting on for a while that I'm selling at like $20 just to get rid of them. And I've still got some of my stock from IPR that it's now at 70 something bucks per book. You can get a free PDF. But it's just not all about supporting me. You need to support my friend Eddie and his great like second edition Pugmire book and all the other amazing stuff he's working on. And if I'm not mistaken, Eddie, don't you have a Patreon where you're writing stuff and providing great fiction for people?
I do, in fact. I'm doing a pay per release Patreon, so it's not every month. It's whenever I put a story out, and it will be at this rate somewhat less than every month, or some more than every month. because time is not what I'd hoped for. But I am really doing Realms of Pugmire fiction. I'm releasing short stories. At the time of recording this, I've released one. I'm about to release my second. So yeah, come by this weekend, and I recently cashed out my Patreon, so I have gotten enough money to pay for pizza. So I appreciate that. Um, and also, if you buy Realms of Pugmire stuff on Drive Thru RPG, I get a percentage of that, and the royalties from that help me purchase the entire run of Transformers Energon. So thank you for enabling my bad decisions.
And before we go, I will tell you that seeing Eddie get a delivery of Transformers because they showed up that morning, and him looking at the screen like a joyful kid on a holiday when they unwrap their present, who's maybe 10, was heartwarming and yet distressing that a man of Eddie's advanced age could look that happy. I mean, like literally trying to watch him lift that Blu-ray was disturbing.
I mean, you keep going with the age jokes, but you know what? I'm experienced, and people should respect that.
I make these jokes because I am right there with you.
Oh,
So
I
I'm
know, I
making
know.
it you, I'm making it myself.
I recognize that. But yeah, no, I mean I'm excited to watch them. They're so bad. It's such bad Transformers, but I'm going to enjoy watching it because that's the kind of person I am. We love watching sometimes things that are terrible for us.
Any
Now that
closing words or thoughts for our listeners
I mean,
now
to be
that
fair,
we've
that's also kind
battled
of a
on?
summarizing of Class Doctor Who. Now that I think about it, but no, yeah. So we will see you all next week when we start talking about X-Men '97.
Yes, you did it.